www.fortlauderdale.gov/government/HPB. Individuals who wish to speak on an item prior to the close of public comment period, you will need to sign up online. If you have trouble signing up, please email planning@fortlauderdale.gov or call 954-828-5265. Please provide your name and address. If you cannot be identified, you will not be provided with access to the meeting. Please remember to mute yourself if you are not speaking and silence any other devices and speakers so we do not hear interference. I'll now turn it over to the chair to start the meeting.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I will call this meeting to order at what I'm showing is 5:02 p.m. This is Jason B. Blank, Vice Chair, acting in my capacity as Chair. And at this point, we're going to start by taking roll to make sure that we have a quorum here. Trish, you want me to go through and call the roll?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so I'll call the roll. Barbara Lyons.
I'm here.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. Caldwell Cooper. Caldwell Cooper.
Caldwell actually will not be on this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Arthur Marcus.
Present.
Good evening.
Good evening.
David Parker. Dave, you on? Maybe not. Richard Rosa, I heard that you were on earlier. He's still with us? Rich? Well, I'm showing that Richard is present, but I haven't heard him. Oh, is that him?
I see his name on the list.
I see that he just left. He just left the meeting, so he's probably going to try to relog in. I'm guessing he had some technical problems. In the meantime, Tim Chavone, you there, buddy?
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Good to see you. All right. So with that, along with myself, that gives us 4 members. Is that a quorum or do we need 5? I don't recall.
We do need 5 members.
Yeah, we need 5, so we have to wait on Mr. Rosa to answer.
My audio should be on now. I don't know if my video is coming in, but I heard you there, so I'm here.
Nope, you're here. That's great. Rich, good to have you here. And that makes 5. Perfect. We have a quorum. So thank you everybody for coming. We appreciate all of you being here. So the first item of business at this point, now that we've established a quorum, is we do have the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which seemed to be ages ago. That was on March 2nd of 2020. Are there any amendments or challenges to the minutes as presented?
No.
No.
Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Aye. I mean,
All right.
second.
All right, so Tim, you're moving to approve?
Yes, sir.
And
All right.
Arthur will second.
Thanks, Arthur. Appreciate that. We have a motion and a second. There is no discussion on a motion to approve the minutes. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 To approve. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Wonderful. The minutes are approved. The next item of business is our election. We do have to elect our new chair and vice chair.
Mr. Chair, this is Shari. Did you want to do the Pledge of Allegiance at all before that, or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we could do that. I'm sorry. I was ready to get down to business, but let's go ahead and do that, right now and start off our meeting. So I believe we're going to have our lovely host post an image of our beautiful flag, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody's going to post it. All right, there we go. All right, so I'll go ahead and lead, and you can feel free to join on your own. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
all.
Thank you. And with that, I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday weekend celebrating our Independence Day. It was great for us, hot but fun. All right, so now that we have done the pledge, approved the minutes, and we do have a quorum, we do have to hold our elections. We have to elect a chair and a vice chair. So I will entertain any nominations for the position of chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to nominate Jason Blank.
Thank you, Arthur. I appreciate it.
Me
I
too.
will- Thanks, Tim. I will accept the nomination. I do appreciate the vote of confidence by y'all. Is there any other nominations for chair from the floor? Hearing none. Do we even need to actually have a vote, or am I officially chair just by
Yeah,
way?
yes, you would have a vote now.
Okay. All those in favor well, I'll close the nominations period. All those in favor of my nomination as chair of the board, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you so much. I believe I've been elected. So I don't know if, I don't know if I should say thank you or thank you, but either way, I'm happy to be elevated. We do need, however, a vice chair at this point. So I would take any nominations from the board for the position of vice chair.
I would like to nominate Arthur Marcus.
I would second that nomination. Arthur, do you accept the nomination for vice chair?
I do.
Wonderful. Any other nominations for vice chair from the board?
None.
We don't want to give him a run for his money at all.
No.
All right. Well, with that, we'll close the nomination period. And all those in favor of Arthur Marcus as vice chair of the Historic Preservation Board at this time, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Arthur, did you vote for yourself? I don't think I heard you.
I voted for myself.
Okay, there you go. Good. Any abstentions? Hearing none. Congratulations, Arthur. You are currently
you.
the new vice chair. Mazel tov. Okay, so now that our elections are done, I've now, I guess, now I'm running the show officially as chair. Not that that really means anything different than what it was, but it's wonderful. Thank you all for being here, and again for your vote of confidence. Arthur, really looking forward to working together over the
Great.
next year. It's going to be good. Okay, so we do have to discuss and go through the public sign-in and the swearing in of the public. Trish or Shari, are there any things? Or is there anything, excuse me, that we need to review, or any comments or statements that need to be made prior to just going through the basics here?
Nothing at this time. I'm just going to go ahead and swear everyone in, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. So let me just make a brief comment then. If you are an applicant who intends to address the board, or if you're a member of the public who is intending to speak on any of the items before the board this evening, you do have to be sworn in prior to doing so. We are going to have the city attorney representative swear you in so that you can address the board accordingly. So with that, Sherry, it's all yours.
Yes, hi. If you are going to speak tonight, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please answer.
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Okay. And hopefully you've all registered with the city. You do have to fill out the virtual meeting form on the city's website, I believe, to make sure that they are aware that you're going to be speaking, or emailing them as well. I'm sure that those of you who are attending tonight have already done that, so we appreciate that. Just a note as we move forward, any member of the public who does wish to speak after each item is presented and discussed by the board, you will have 3 minutes to speak on those items. Representatives of associations and groups will have a 5-minute time limit to present to the board, although I don't anticipate that we would reach those amounts, but just wanted to let everybody know up front. Okay, so with that, we are going to get into our agenda items tonight. The first agenda item that we have is for HPB review and comment. It is case number PLN HP COA 200-20002. And that is the installation of a temporary fire station and construction of a surface parking lot adjacent to the Bonnet House, a historic landmark. So with that, I don't know if there's a staff report that we need to address or just the, if the applicant wants to come up, but I'll call for a staff report, Trish, if you want to go through that first.
Sure. This property, as Jason mentioned, is located adjacent to the Bonnet House, which is why we're conducting the review and comment. But it is for the installation of a temporary fire station and construction of a surface parking lot. The property is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of North Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard and Vistamar Street. On March 10th, the Development Review Committee reviewed this project. And as part of those comments that were provided at that review, the HPB meeting and your review and comment was required as part of that. And then this application will be scheduled for the Planning and Zoning Board next, and then ultimately the City Commission. Proposed as part of the project is an installation of a one-story prefabricated trailer with a canopy structure to serve as the temporary fire station, while a new facility is constructed further north on Sunrise Boulevard. The plans also show the construction of the paved surface parking lot to accommodate 94 parking spaces. The visual impacts of this proposed work on the Bonnet House are anticipated to be low due to the limited amount of construction proposed and the distance from the landmark structure. However, a phase 1 archaeological survey of the property is suggested to be conducted prior to commencing construction. And this was also included as part of the DRC comments. For this review and comment, we just asked that the board weigh in on any potential impacts that this project may have on the Bonnet House. And that's all.
Great, thank you so much, Trish. We appreciate it. I saw Ms. Tokar here. I saw that she was sworn in. I believe that she is the applicant on this piece on behalf of the city. So I would ask Ms. Tokar if you'd like to address the board at this time. We'd love to hear from you.
Good evening and thank you. I'm actually in the senior project manager managing construction of remaining fire stations for the city. Our consultant for this project is Alex Sheffer. He represents Craven and Thompson and Associates, and I would like for him to do the presentation.
Absolutely, that works for us. Mr. Sheffer, if you are here, I believe you've been sworn in as well. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, sir. So I'm Alex Sheffer with Craven Thompson. We are the consultant, as Irina kind of spoke about. And I just wanted to kind of run through, I prepared a presentation. Is it all right if I show the screen?
It's fine with me. I believe that they may have turned it over to you, so you should be able to do it.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So discussed 735 North Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard is the address, and myself is Alex Sheffer, and Irina is with us as well. So the site is located just south of the Bonnet House, and it's adjacent to Vistamar and Breakers in A1A. Put together some existing site conditions. The first one on the left is the view from the property north to the Bonnet House, facing north. The second view is from A1A to the west, all along the north property line. The next one is from Vistamar north into the Bonnet House along Breakers. And then the last one is from Breakers east across the property. Wanted to run through kind of the proposed public improvements for the project. We are proposing new 7-foot sidewalks all along Vistamar and Breakers Avenue. It's kind of tough to see here, but it basically encompasses the entire perimeter of the site, and there's going to be tree installation along the entire perimeter as well, and some landscaping. Part of our infrastructure would be to put stormwater improvements along Breakers Avenue, where we're providing additional pavement. That's one thing that I wanted to point out to everybody. And then the last thing is, after the permanent fire station is constructed over at Sunrise, that's the purpose of the project, really. So it'd be a temporary structure on this property until that property is all constructed and developed, and then this one would get turned over. The trailer would get actually removed from the site, and then a full parking lot would be built in that spot where the trailer and canopy currently are proposed. There's a blow up of the site plan, which we can come back to. And then I wanted to give everybody an idea what the buildings will look like. So on the top is the south elevation, the north elevation, the east elevation, and then you can see the canopy structure that's kind of connected all together, and kind of the orientation. So the actual trailer would be on the south side, and then on the north of it is the actual canopy structure. And then here's just another view. And then this is the last sheet that we have. Shows the trees and the landscaping that's going to be installed all along Breakers and Vistamar. And then the screening on the very north side in between the Bonnet House and our property. So I can run back. If there's any questions, I kind of wanted to open it up and flip through and address any concerns you guys might have.
So Mr. Sheffer, this is Jason Blank. Just real quick, this looks like a similar, I wasn't on the board at the time, and I don't believe that the project I'm going to speak of came before this board, but this looks like a similar setup to the temporary station that was on the east side of the Intercoastal, just off Oakland Park a few years back when they were rebuilding the fire station over that way. Is that correct?
It is actually. So it's actually that exact trailer is going to get relocated to this site. So that is exactly the trailer that will be used.
Reuse, recycle, it's a wonderful thing.
And a new canopy structure, because that one, if you see it, it doesn't look great shape. So we're proposing a new canvas.
I think you got hit by a hurricane, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yeah, so that's part of this project as well.
Looks good. Any other comments or questions from the board?
What's the purpose of then turning it into a parking lot? And why are you doing that?
Irina, you want to take that one, or you want me to address?
No, if you could.
Okay, I think you said, what's the purpose of putting it into a parking lot after?
Yeah, I mean,
Or,
how is it used now, and, you know, what's the point of making it into a parking lot?
I think that is just to, I think that's part of a future project. Excuse me if I'm not that privy to the knowledge of what's going to happen in the future, but my understanding was that we would try to mimic what was on the east side, on the west side, and just kind of complete it so it doesn't look like it's missing. And to use the area as best as possible, and provide as much parking as possible. But I think that is kind of open for the future, right, Irina?
yes, I mean, the purpose of putting the temporary fire station, so we can build the new one and demolish it, because we're building a new fire station 13, exactly where existing one is located. So we would move staff to this location for about a year and a half while we're constructing a new facility, and then it will be demolished. In we'll have to develop the remaining portion of a site as a parking lot. If I understood the question correctly, I'm sorry if we haven't answered it, but let us know any other
So my
information.
question is, why do you have to develop it as a parking lot?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think I could give some information to Barbara on a question.
Let's do it.
Hi, Barbara, this is Tim.
Hi, Tim.
I have the Parrot Lounge. It's on the other side of the Bonnet House. And I can't speak for the city, but I can tell you that for many years, the city has been researching different satellite parking locations. And this goes back 10, 15 years. that particular location was considered for parking a long time ago. This was even when Mayor Seiler was mayor, his second term, I believe. And there was always plans to do a surface parking lot there because of the issues with building on it and interference with the Bonnet House and height restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. It became a revenue stream, or once would become a revenue stream for the city's, make money for the city. And it would service a lot of the businesses in my neighborhood that have no parking at all, because the parking that we have is dedicated to the hotel only. We have a very limited amount of spots. So it would become a service parking area for beachgoers and businesses in the area. That was the intention that I was told. And that was long before the fire station was even a consideration. The end.
Oh, thanks for clarifying it.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
You may, Mr. Marcus.
Thank you. Following up on what Barbara said, that was a very interesting comment, because although I certainly am aware of the need for parking in the area, as Tim has mentioned, the question would be, along the oceanfront, along A1A, is that the highest and best use for this property? It's obviously
Absolutely
not for you. We can't answer it here, but that's someone else in the city.
Arthur, absolutely not. But because there was so much to do in terms of what you could build there and adjacent to the Bonnet House, if you want to take all things into consideration without any restriction, no, of course you could build a hotel there. You could put a 10-story parking garage there. You could put a lot of things there. You could have put the Publix that we're going to be talking about there. But the fact of the matter is, all things considered, the fact that it's only going to be a surface lot means that the city's ownership can change the use whenever it is determined to be something different. A surface parking lot is just a surface parking lot. It can be turned over to something else in a very easy amount of time. They won't be building anything on it. So everybody was pretty excited about that. It seemed like a good compromise.
All right, well, I had two other questions. I understand what you're saying. And I realize I wasn't privy to all the discussions that have certainly preceded this by years, I'm sure. My two questions on this project are, one, the effect on Bonnet House is certainly our prime consideration. Is there any need for, I don't see any mention of landscaping anywhere. Landscaping, I mean, that's one of we just opened up that entrance to the south part of the property as an entrance to Bonnet House a few years ago. Is there a need for any landscaping?
I kind of glossed over it, but we do propose pretty heavy landscaping that meets the minimum city code. So there's going to be street canopy trees. Let me get my highlighter here, and I'll show you kind of where it's tough to see, obviously, without. So these are big canopy trees. That's another one on the property, but this, we'll get into, I guess, ownership too. So this is the actual property line. And this roadway is actually private property. It's city-owned private property. So part of the project is to construct a new fire lane through there and to actually build a sidewalk to replace the existing asphalt that's currently painted that provides that walkway into the Bonnet House. So the idea was to kind of mimic everything else that's going on and create a walkway through there, and also install canopy trees and some buffered plantings all along here. So there is some pretty heavy landscaping. I mean, it's about as much as we could possibly fit in talking to our landscape consultant.
Well, thank you for reviewing that. That helps a lot. My one more question I had, and since we're concerned about any effect on the Bonnet House, my question is, what about sirens from the firehouse? Won't that penetrate the beautiful quiet of the Bonnet House?
So,
well, Alex, would you like to, because I believe you did speak with the Bonnet House.
I did speak with the bond house, so I'll kind of talk about my understanding of the operations, and this is not, I guess, what the fire operations is really going to do, but from my understanding, this is an automatic gate, and unless absolutely necessary, they're going to not set off sirens and alarms and anything, because they're going to have full access through here to get out. So in talking to the chief at one meeting, don't quote me on what's going to actually happen, but he kind of explained that they don't really need that on all the time. It's only in certain situations, and they wait till they're in the intersection to go, and that's when they turn that sirens and all the things on. But this gate, I'll talk about that again, it's automatic. So when they have a call,
Right.
This gate would automatically open up and then they pull out.
So what you're saying is that on Vistamar Street down here, that's when the sirens would go off?
So it'd just be the truck. It wouldn't be like a firehouse siren, is what I understand. Is that correct, Irina?
Yeah,
Yes.
I know you've met with Bonnet House, and if they're not concerned, it's fine. I just wanted to raise the issue.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I talked to Patrick actually last week and kind of mentioned the project to him and kind of gave him a couple 15-minute rundown similar to what we're doing here. And his main concern, I'll go over with the board, is really this area here, the utilities that exist. So we're trying to kind of dress up this area as much as we can. We're installing some trees and some landscaping to try to provide a buffer.
When you say
and separate that
utilities, what are you referring to?
There's some above ground boxes, like cable TV and internet boxes that unfortunately have to stay because they serve the whole community and area. And this is all in an existing utility easement. So we're trying to, we got to stay out of the easement as far as planning goes. But here in this area, we are installing some trees and some landscaping.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Sheffer, thank you so much for your presentation. Ms. Tokar, you as well. We do appreciate it. Any other comments from the board before we close this matter?
I'm ready to endorse it.
All right, I think we are good. Thank you so much. We do appreciate your time on this one.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so that's going to bring us to our next matter on the agenda. That is going to be case number PLN HP COA 20040001. It is a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations. Pertaining to this matter, I will call down the roll to do those. Ms. Lines, you're still muted if you're trying to reach us.
Jason, something's happening with your audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was I cutting out there?
It's sounding weird.
Sorry, Comcast has been not so friendly to me recently. So I'm going to ask for disclosures. We're going to start with Ms. Lines. Any disclosures you'd like to make, site visits, communications regarding this matter?
No,
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marcus?
Drive-by.
Drive-by, okay. Mr. Rosa?
Bye-bye.
Oh, I did drive by it.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Chavone?
No, none.
All right, and none from the chair. With that, I'll ask for the staff report on this item.
All right, this is a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations for the removal of the existing 5-foot chain link fence and installation of a new 6-foot high green vinyl coated chain link fence and rolling gate with a green privacy screen. This property is located in the Sailboat Bend Historic District and is at the northeast corner of Southwest 2nd Street and Southwest 8th Avenue. This property was issued a variance from the Board of Adjustment on September 14th, 1971. And as part of the variance, the property owner obtained permission for the uses on the lot and permits the property owner to construct a chain link fence on the property. As part of that, they do have to abide by any new requirements that were put in place following that Board of Adjustment variance, and that would include the Sailboat Bend Historic District material and design guidelines and any landscaping requirements. The Historic Preservation Board did hear this case on January 7th, 2019 for the same request. I think the only thing that's different is that at that time, the application didn't include the green privacy screen, but that application was denied at that meeting. So current plans, like I mentioned, do show the placement of the fence at the perimeter of the property and landscaping to act as a buffer. And under the general criteria for certificates of appropriateness in section 472411 D3CI of the ULDR, under criterion B, which applies to the concerns of the relationship between the proposed work and other properties within the historic district, staff responded in saying that typically the placement of a chain link fence along a right-of-way or in front of a structure is discouraged in a historic district. However, due to the Board of Adjustment variance approved in 1971, it does allow for that type of fencing in this particular location. And additionally, as part of the Sailboat Bend Historic District material and design guidelines, it states that the green vinyl coated chain link fence is an acceptable material in general, but again, not necessarily in this location. The application's also been reviewed for compliance with the ULDR by zoning, and at this time, the location of landscaping along Southwest 8th Avenue and along the northern property line does not completely meet the requirements as outlined in the ULDR, and would need to be adjusted to fulfill those requirements. So in conclusion, staff finds that the application for this certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number PLN HP 2004001, located at 721 Southwest 2nd Street, partially meets the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D3CI of the ULDR, and partially meets the criteria for consideration of materials as listed under 4717(7)B of the ULDR. And the following conditions are provided for the consideration of the board if the application is to be approved. The first condition for consideration is that the existing fence post, if they are to be retained, they should be painted to match the surrounding chain link fence. And 2 existing galvanized rolling gate shall be replaced with a new chain link rolling gate to match the surrounding fencing. And the third condition is the site plan needs to be updated to specify approved materials for fencing and additional landscaping as required by zoning. And the fourth condition is this application is subject to the approval of building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements. And that is it.
All right, thank you so much. I do see that, let's see, it looks like the applicant would be the Free Bethlehem Baptist Church with Mr. Joseph as the agent here. I don't know if Mr. Joseph or there's any other representative on behalf of the applicant that would like to address the board.
So, yes, my name is Michael Garcia. I'm the attorney for the church. So I'm here on their behalf.
Hi, Mr. Garcia. It's good to see you again. At this point in time, I know that you were sworn in, so I'll turn it over to you to present to the board.
All right, thank you. On behalf of the church, I think we can comply with the conditions that Ms. Logan just mentioned. We want to bring this up to code and make it look good. There was issues that there was a tenant that I was renting that caused a lot of issues for the property to obtain these violations. And now we're in the process of rectifying them and bringing up the property to code and obviously to aesthetically with the historic district. So we're hoping that you'll approve this condition upon the conditions that Ms. Logan just mentioned that we will fully comply with in order to move forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia. Stand by because I'm going to ask if there are any questions for you on behalf of the applicant in just a moment. But before I do that, I do want to turn it over and open up for public comment. If there are any members of the public that would wish to speak on this item, this would be the time. Please come forward and identify yourself and be heard.
Chair, this is Yvonne Redding. There are 3 members of the public signed up to speak on this matter. None of them have been sworn in that I saw when we first did the swearing in. The first is Wanda Beecham, but I didn't see her on the list. And she is a representative of the Sailboat Bend Civic Association and would be allotted 5 minutes to speak.
All right, wonderful. Ms. Beecham, are you present with us this evening?
I do not see her on the list.
Either do I. I'm looking right now. Okay,
And,
so
And the second speaker was Justin Beecham.
Mr. Beecham, are you present? Okay, I also do not see him on the list of participants.
And then the third, was Maggie Hunt.
Ms. Hunt, are you present with us this evening?
They are not on the list.
Okay,
So
yeah.
all 3 were down as opposed to this project.
All right, that is noted. I just want to clarify for the record that when we say on the list, we're talking about the list of participants that are in virtual attendance to this meeting. Okay, so with that, then, Mr. Garcia, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. Well, actually, before I do that, let me ask, are there any other members of the public who wish to be heard who are with us this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Now, Mr. Garcia, I'm going to bring you back in for any questions from the board. And I will turn it over to the board at this time to ask any questions or concerns they might have.
May I make one more comment before I take questions?
Yeah, please do.
So, and this has been a process, the property's been obviously in some time in this condition, but the members of the church have been in close contact with the city in order to make whatever arrangements or modifications in order to come to compliance. It's not like they don't want to come into compliance. So I just want to make that clear that Mr. Luke has been in close contact with the city. I normally get in contact, but they wanted to be in contact with the city, and they've done that in order to get to this point. And obviously there's a few things that we need to finish, but there's no lack of wanting to come into compliance on behalf of the church.
Just to clarify, Mr. Garcia, when you say Mr. Luke, are you referring to Luke Joseph of
Yes.
Cornerstone Property Management?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank
He's one of the representatives from the church.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. I'll turn it over to the board. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Mr. Chair, Arthur, Marcus, I first wanted to compliment the applicant. I know we had a long discussion the last time you were present at the board about the viability of chain link, but we understand because of the prior case that you're allowed to use it. I'm also glad that someone was listening at the last board, because one of the things we did talk about was using landscaping to at least grow up and try and hide the chain link, since this is in a historic district. And I'm glad to see that you put landscaping all around the property now. So I think that helps tremendously.
We thank you for the comment, and based on what Ms. Logan said, we still need a little bit more landscaping, and we're willing to meet the landscaping to.
That was the other part of my question, really, to Ms. Logan. What is deficient on the north property line? Is it not enough landscaping?
It's just the placement of the landscaping on the site plan. The landscaping on Southwest 8th Avenue needs to be set closer to the actual fence, right in the swale. And then on the northern end, it needs to, there needs to be a larger buffer between the property to the north and the existing property. So they have the landscaping on the outside of the fencing, when
I see that.
it needs to be on the inside of the fencing and create a larger space to fulfill the zoning requirements.
So here's one last question for you, Tricia. I don't see any mention, or I haven't heard any mention of sidewalks. There are no sidewalks on these 2 street frontages?
No, not currently. There's not.
And will there be?
That is not part of this request.
But what does city zoning say? That's just for my own edification.
I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that question.
All right.
It's typically something that's discussed when there is a new development on a parcel. And in this case, they're requesting a fence and improvements to the lot.
So how far is typically the landscaping from the curb? Do we have a sense of that?
So from the property line, the fencing has to be set back 3 feet from the property line on the sides that front right of ways. And in that space, that is where the landscaping needs to be located.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Is the fencing that's there in the proper position, or you plan to move it? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
The fencing, the current placement of the fencing is correct. I believe it is in the same location that it will be in the future. However, the fencing that was installed, that's currently there, was installed without a permit, and it's just a galvanized metal chain link fence rather than the green vinyl coated chain link fence, which is a requirement of the Sailboat Bend Historic District.
And if I'm not mistaken, that original chain link fence that was unpermitted was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was not installed by the current church. That was installed by a prior tenant or something.
Correct.
Okay, I seem to remember that from the last meeting. Yeah.
So the prior tenant has caused significant issues, code enforcement issues, and other issues for the church, which obviously first we're dealing with coming into compliance, and then we'll deal with the tenant, the former tenant that he's no longer there, with a lawsuit, what have you. But the church really wants to come into compliance and be a good citizen. And
Sure. Yeah, no, we certainly appreciate that.
Could I ask 2 questions?
Yes, absolutely, Ms. Lyons.
That is, the first is, do we have any idea why those who represent the public who did not attend the meeting opposed this? Have they discussed it with you? Mr.
Chair, sorry.
I'm sorry. Hang on 2 seconds. I'm not sure that it would be appropriate to speculate on what people who signed up but did not appear believed, or why they signed up in opposition to or in favor of any item. I just don't believe that's something that should be considered. We're bound to the 4 corners of the application as presented to us, as well as the material that is presented to us. So I would just note that.
Did Garcia have any conversation with these people, and could he fill us in?
I have not had any conversation with them.
Okay. And my second question, as being new to this board, why was the proposal denied in 2019?
Trish, maybe you can expand on that a little bit. If I remember vaguely, but I'd rather a more accurate explanation, because I think that's a question that's well taken.
And I would answer that, but that precedes me. I came after the fact, so I think Trish would be better, suited to answer that question.
Well, the application was denied at the previous meeting. I think I reviewed the minutes today, and it seems as though the discussion was primarily about the chain link fencing and the concern about placing the chain link fence on the right of ways when that hasn't been done previously within the historic district along the right of ways. So concerns about setting a precedent. And then there was also a couple of members of the public did speak on the item in opposition to the proposal as it stood. And towards the end of the discussion, the the board did ask for the applicant to work with the neighbors, the members of the public who spoke on the item, to come to an agreement. And ultimately it was denied. I'll tell you the vote in just a second.
And while you're looking at that, if I remember correctly, Ms. Lyons, I believe that it was denied because the application specifically only addressed certain factors and did not include others, which would have otherwise made it acceptable, such as the landscaping was an issue with some of the neighbors because they didn't like, if I remember correctly, the cars that were there, I think, right? Arthur, maybe you can correct me or join me. That's my memory.
I think if I remember also, I'm not sure about what you're talking about, Jason, but the members of the surrounding neighborhood, which is the Sailboat Bend Historic District, if I remember correctly, Trish, I don't remember, is chain link fencing, is the green chain link fencing allowed in the Sailboat Bend District?
That was, I think, that was part of the concern, right, Trish? Was because
I thought that was
wasn't,
part of
but they
the
were
original.
grandfathered in, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So as part of our material and design guidelines for the Sailboat Bend Historic District, the green vinyl coated chain link fencing is permitted. However, in the past, it's never been applied to where it's been seen from the right of way or in a prominent location. It's more been approved on a side or rear of a lot where it's not precisely on the right of way, which was part of the conversation at the prior meeting.
And also there's a lot more landscaping, I believe, that's shown today that really, once it grows up, and this was one more question, do we know how tall some of these shrubs will get to be? Will they hide the fence? Will they show the fence? We don't know.
I don't know right off the top of my head, but I can look at that in the application.
Okay.
What their height is at the time of planting, which typically is 3 to 4 feet.
No, I don't mean the time of planting. I mean, what do they grow, the height they grow into?
Right. I'm not an expert in landscaping.
I understand. Yeah,
Address that.
thanks.
I do see that that one of our speakers has appeared on video with Wanda Beecham.
Wonderful. So, well, I guess that what we should then do, and I'm misreading, I think that's maybe what you were trying to get my attention earlier for. So in light of that, is there any objection from the board to reopening public comment to allow Ms. Beecham to be heard?
No.
No.
Okay,
No.
great. So then
Chair, they also have to be sworn in.
yeah, I'm with you. So with that, then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and reopen the comments so that Ms. Beecham, who had previously signed up to be heard, can be recognized. I would ask Ms. Beecham to be sworn in prior to speaking, and Ms. Beecham would have, Ms. Redding, I believe you told me 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Yep. Then Ms. Beecham would be given 5 minutes to address the board.
Hello, this is Ms. Beecham. I'm trying to catch up because there's some issues. I was just on the phone with David Parker. He can't get on either.
Okay. Well, let's
so
get
we're
you
having
sworn in.
technical-
Let's
Yes,
get
please.
you sworn in, and then we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yes, and there's a couple other people that are trying to get on as well that are supposed to speak.
Okay, Ms. Beecham, this is Assistant City Attorney Shari Wallen. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I sure do. Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Ms. Beecham, please state your name, and then you will be recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, my name is Wanda Beecham. I am the president of the Sailboat Bend Civic Association, and I am here tonight speaking in reference to the request for the Historic Preservation Board for the property at 721 Southwest 2nd Street. With regards to the fence, what I am speaking, okay. I did send some photos as well. I'm not sure whether or not you have received those pictures concerning this property. What I'm calling about, what I'd like to speak and say is that this property, as the president of the Sailboat Bend Civic Association, the membership has actively been pursuing and urging the city to bring this property in compliance. The membership has voted that this property, that we aggressively seek to bring this property into compliance, because there are several things that are not in compliance at this property. The membership has voted in the past, in January of this year, 2019. It was suggested to the property owner in the past that when they came forth to request a permit for a chain link fence, that they come before the Civic Association and present their plan. This has never happened. They have not approached the association with that. And also, you know, I understand that on several points here, we keep referencing the actual variance, the zoning variance that was issued in 1971. And in fact, if we look at the information that Tricia has provided, she states in her documentation that the order from the BOA permitted the property owner to construct a chain link fence. This is allowed in perpetuity, and whoever owns the land in the future is also allowed to have a chain link fence. And this is important, so I want us to really listen to what it states. As long as they comply with the other requirements in the variance, as well as applicable sections of the ULDR. So I have a copy of the variance before me, and the variance speaks very clearly that the fence was only allowed so that it would keep out junk cars. That is why they were allowed the fence. But this whole property is filled with junk cars. It is a junk car lot. And I did add some photos of the junk cars that are there. And the zoning variance states that the lot was supposed to be clean, and it was only supposed to be used for customer parking during the day, and no cars are supposed to be stored there on the property. So with that being the case, we as a historic district should not allow a chain link fence to be put up on this property, because they are not in compliance with the actual zoning, with the actual variance that was given. And that states that clearly. I have sent photos of the junk cars. There are citations, open citations that are sitting with the city right now with fines for junk cars. And this is an ongoing issue for 5 years now. And for us to allow a chain link fence, which is not appropriate, and it is discouraged to use a chain link fence. I just hope that the Historic Preservation Board will keep that in mind, that on those 2 counts alone, here we are in a historic district, and we're back here again talking about a chain link fence. And I don't really think it's appropriate for us to permit that. And it's definitely discouraged by the Historic Preservation Design Guidelines. We should not use chain link fence. And I'm not quite sure why, if he's not in compliance with the variance, he should not be allowed a chain link fence. And like I said, I did have some other pictures, because actually he's opened up a new business there called Tri-County Junk Cars. And he's openly advertising on Google and all these other different websites that he'll come and purchase your junk car for good money. And he will drag it over here and he will store it in the middle of our historic district. And I think it is shameful. It is shameful that they keep doing this. They told us they were going to evict this person, and they have not. They are not being good faith property owners, neighbors in this district.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We appreciate the comments. Do we have any other of the listed speakers that are present, Ms. Redding, that you've seen come up yet? I see your hand is raised.
Miss Beecham's husband was going to speak after her on the same computer.
Okay.
And then Ms. Hunt is trying to call in now. And I
Great.
do have the images if I could share my screen.
Works for me. Hang on, Mr. Beecham. Give me 2 seconds here. I just want to see if we can get these images shared, and then we'll call on you for your time.
Are you able to see the image?
Yes.
This is the image Ms. Beecham shared, and then there's two that her husband sent. And
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and if you could flip through all three, and then we'll hear from Mr. Beecham, and he can address the other two as well.
So those are the three.
We also had another photo that I couldn't upload, Yvonne. Is there any way we can share screen so we can see that? Because it shows that they're openly has a business there called Tri-County Junk Cars.
Well, maybe we can email it over to Yvonne. Maybe that's.
Yeah, I tried to, and things were not. I tried to all day. I've had issues all day with this whole process.
I'm sorry for that. Yeah, I know. It's we're all trying to get through this one. Well, while we're trying to figure that out, Mr. Beecham, I don't want to keep you waiting anymore. So let's go ahead and get you sworn in. And then once you're sworn in, you will have 3 minutes to address the board.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Most certainly, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. You have 3 minutes to address the board.
All right. I just basically want to reiterate what she had went over, and she was pretty thorough about what she said. The fact is the neighborhood has many blights, and we're trying to eliminate them as best we can. This is right on the entrance of our neighborhood, and to condone these inferior materials, I just don't think it's acceptable, especially when, you know, if you actually read the variance, you can see that all of the concerns that the Board of Adjustments had have come to fruition. The junk cars, the people sleeping in the cars, and so they've definitely not adhered to the rules that were set forth in this variance. It's not just like a short period of time. This has been happening. It's been happening since 2015, and we just ask that you please consider our neighborhood and help us to make it as good as it can possibly be. Just basically because this neighbor has shown bad faith, and we don't need any more of that. We've already got plenty of it. And really, to be honest with you, I've said about all I need to say. I think everybody kind of understands. Okay, I'm being okay. The variance simply says that the parking to be limited to employees and customer cars pertaining to his business. It has nothing to do with junk cars. As a matter of fact, it actually says that the reason that the fence is going to would be allowed would be to keep junk cars out. And is there anything else that you want me to go over?
Just that they told us that they were going to evict some.
They did say they were going to evict him, but he lacks candor.
All right. Well, sir, I appreciate it. If you still have 42 seconds, if there's anything else that you'd like to address the board on.
I just really hope that, and the board's always been really good about making conscientious judgments on our neighborhood, and really appreciate that and appreciate everybody's time. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Mayor,
Mr.
I have
Beecham.
one question for the speaker.
Yes.
Sure. Just real quick, Arthur, before you go there, I just want to note, it looks like David Parker has joined the meeting. So I just wanted the record to reflect that Mr. Parker is present. Go ahead, Arthur.
My question is this: you mentioned that before 2015, there was another use on the property. What was that? Or what
It was a vacant lot with a big tree in the middle of it, and mysteriously the tree disappeared. I've got tax photos from times previous to them owning the property and filling it up with junk cars. And it was actually just a vacant grass lot. And in addition to the parking the cars that they're not supposed to be parking, they're all on gravel except for a small section of illegally placed asphalt. So that's that's another violation of the code. So they've totally transformed it into a junkyard. It had no resemblance of a junkyard before they owned it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Miss Redding, do we have any other of the speakers that had signed up?
Maggie Hunt is trying to call in because she does not have Zoom downloaded, but she hasn't been able to sign in yet.
Okay, so with that, we will close the public
Do you
comment.
want me to try to call her?
No, that's okay. Thank you. If she's able to join us, we can always readdress it if she makes it before we vote, but I'm not going to hold the meeting up any longer. All right, so we appreciate it. We'll close the public comment at this time. And I will turn it back to the board now for any conversation comments the board might have.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Sure, Mr. Chabon.
Maybe, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if there are these illegal use, or if they are not following the guideline that was set forth for the use of this property, are we not wasting our time even making the call on this? That it's outside our realm right now. It sounds like there's a complete misuse of this. I don't know how it got this far down the road. Mr. Garcia had spoke earlier that he was in a position, and the owners were in a position where they were totally wanted to comply with Ms. Logan's request and all the things that would be set forth. So therefore, there is no end. The end to this is abundantly clear. If what these complaints are saying is true, and the use of this is illegal, and there is a junkyard there that wasn't there before, I don't see how anybody's going to get what they want. So I think the first thing these guys need to do before they even get before us is find out whether or not that junkyard's supposed to be there or not. If that junkyard's legal and they want to put a fence around it, then we can talk about whether that fits the Historic Preservation Board's approval. But if it's not supposed to be a junkyard and we don't put a fence around an empty lot, then we do the same thing. But in the meantime, those guys got to figure out what
I think that
Mr. Garcia, could you review the history of the tenant here and this process of filling the lot with junk cars? Were you aware of that? And are you preparing to evict the tenant as the public speakers have asserted?
So yes, let me address a few things. First, there's been no violations regarding the property of an illegal use. So that's the first I hear of it, and that's it. That would have been, we would address that. That's not the case here. However, we are going to evict that tenant, because that tenant has caused numerous violations with the city, and that we're here because of their actions. And we don't want them there, but obviously COVID happened. There was a stay regarding several lawsuits of what can be done, but we are intending to evict them because they're causing more problems than it's worth. Obviously the neighbors are upset of what they're doing. I don't know, I can't definitively say that it's illegal use or not, because that's never been brought to our attention, but we're gonna get them out of there because they've caused issues where they've done things unpermitted, the fence, they've done things unpermitted regarding the pavement inside the lot. So they've done things that are not permitted by the lease. They haven't complied with the code. So we are going to get them out of there. But the first concern was to come in compliance with the city. And that's why we've been working with the city to make sure we're in compliance, because we want to stop the daily fines
So,
And-
Mr. Garcia, let me just cut you off there because I believe, and Ms. Lyons, I'm going to follow up on your question, and then I think you may have some other inquiries, so I'll come back to you. But I understand, Mr. Garcia, last time your client was before this board, when we first heard this, they kind of had the same song and dance. They were going to evict this person. They created issues. They're going to get rid of them. And I certainly understand the governor's moratorium on evictions is still ongoing. But I mean, has your client taken any affirmative steps to start that process?
So they retain me, but there's nothing I can do right now.
Sure. I mean, you could send 7-day notice. You could file the suit. I mean, have you done so?
The suit is prepared. It hasn't been filed because we wanted to comply with the city first to make sure we were in compliance, and then move to evict them. But
okay. All right. No, I appreciate that. Ms. Lyons, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I am an advocate of the beauty of Sailboat Bend. And I walk in that area frequently. I don't live in that area, but I walk from further east on Las Olas all the way over to Sailboat Bend and back. And when I walked over there today, I made a special point of looking at the property, and I'm just wondering why anyone is permitting such an eyesore.
Well, we're trying to do our best to come in compliance with the city. Well, and the client is, so that we've been in contact, but we have, and I'm not here to
But I was
justify.
surprised to see a lot filled with junk cars and an automotive wheel alignment, tire and brake business in that area.
Well, I want to make sure that we stay focused on the four corners of the application and that we don't get too far aside. I think Ms. Lyons, you certainly bring up points that are important for our consideration, but I don't want to get hung up kind of in the weeds of things beyond the scope of the four corners of the application. Mr. Marcus, I think, did you also have a question?
Yes, I did. I have two questions. One is I'm concerned on a number of counts here. I'm concerned, as Ms. Lyons has said, about this use in this neighborhood, especially with the picture shown over the fence. I can only imagine what it looks like from the high-rise a block away. I'm concerned that the applicant did not go to the Civic Association prior to coming before the board.
Right.
And one other issue is if this is not, if as was asserted, this use is not legal because they've broken whatever, what does the city attorney have to say about this?
Okay, so the first off, the code doesn't require them to go to the Civic Association. That's not in there. That's not a.
No, but the board
Yes.
works on it favorably.
But the board cannot require them to go to the Civic Association. It's not in the code. You have
No,
to.
I said that the board looks
Language of
on
the
it
code.
favorably in its decision.
Right, but we have to apply the code to this decision. Regardless of how you rule, you should apply the code. As far as what the variance of the case law provides, Halifax Area Council on Alcoholism versus City of Daytona Beach, the case law is clear that variances are in perpetuity. The variance itself, while there was a motion and a discussion made in the variance, the binding part of this variance is the order. And the order states as follows: subject to furnishing a fence around property, preventing people from bringing in junk cars, fence to be on that portion of Southwest 2nd Street from the corner of the building and the west side of Southwest 6th Avenue. And fence the alley to the building, limited to parking for employee and customers pertaining to own business. Then it says in one sentence, chain link fence. So the way that the order is written is a little bit confusing because where it says chain link fence, it doesn't have a limitation there. It has some verbiage before that, but at the end, it just simply says in one sentence, chain link fence. So I cannot tell you that I can't use that language so long as they comply with the terms of the variance, because that's just not there. So as far as this application is concerned, this board does not have jurisdiction to decide whether or not someone is violating the code. That is in section 11-3 of the Code of Ordinances, which clearly states there shall be one board and one special magistrate. The board and special magistrate shall have jurisdiction to hear and decide cases in which violations of any provision of the code are alleged. So therefore, it's not within this board's purview to decide whether or not this applicant is violating the Code of Ordinances and whether or not their use is acceptable. What you are to decide is what is in your backup material of whether or not it meets the criteria as asserted in the backup as to whether or not they can construct this fence. So that's what your analysis should be limited to. The rest is for the code board to decide if there are any code violations.
Thank you, Ms. Wallen. And
If I may-
that
I'm
brings
sorry.
me, I'm sorry, just give me 2 seconds, Arthur. So that brings me to a clarification on the staff report, because I want to really make sure that we bring the conversation back to center here on what we need to consider. Trish, 2 questions here. The number one is that the issue is not a chain link fence that would be prohibited, but a green vinyl coated chain link fence would be permissible under the code. Am I correct?
Yes, it is permissible under the sailboat bend material and design guidelines.
And and that has been, my understanding is that that's acceptable to the applicant, and that the code doesn't prohibit a chain link fence nonetheless. It's just discouraged in a historic area. Am I correct?
It is discouraged.
Okay. And yet, in your opinion as staff, you believe that subject to the modifications in landscaping and having the existing fence posts painted to match the new green vinyl chain link fence, this otherwise meets criteria.
No, it's saying, the staff report is saying that it's partially meeting the criteria because there's multiple parts of the criteria. There's the fact that you are allowed to have the green vinyl coated chain link fencing. However, the design guidelines do discourage the use of chain link fence in the historic district.
I see. Okay, so because it's discouraged, you cite that it partially meets, as opposed to saying our recommendations that it should be approved.
Correct. Yeah, we're just stating whether or not it meets the criteria, and in this case, it's partially, partially yes, partially no.
Sure, I appreciate that. Mr. Marcus, you had additional comments?
Thank you. One other comment. I'm really getting concerned about the fact that, and following up on what the city attorney said, I realize that it's not our purview to make these decisions as to whether they're in compliance with their agreement. But I would hope that prior to this issue coming before this board, that we'd have some clarification as to what the story is. Are they complying to their agreement, or has it been broken in past years?
Well, but I think that that's important, though, Art, is that's not something that we can consider.
No,
That
we
might-
can't do.
That might be something that we want to know. That might be something that we want to know, right? But it's not something that we can consider for here.
No, I'm not saying that we should consider it. I'm saying we should have that information.
Yeah, and that maybe in the future, that's something that we can certainly talk about is situations like that, and other findings or rulings. But at this point in time, I think that we need to remain centered. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the 4 corners of the application before us. We've had this situation in the past where there might be other factors that we think should be taken into consideration, but as we know, and I've said it often, we're bound by the 4 corners of the application before us, right, everybody? So let's look to that. Art, I see you have another question.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Come back to me.
All right. Are there any other comments?
Chair, yeah, I'm
Mr.
just
Yes.
perplexed by the position that this puts us in. I would think that the building and zoning and code and all these hoops that this proposal has to jump through would stop the fence from being approved at the city's level. And I know we're not separating, but we're identifying our authority to just be whether or not this meets the code for HPB. At the same time, we have a responsibility to what's going on in that neighborhood to preserve historic preservation. And a junkyard in an area, Sailboat Bend, it's a historically preserved neighborhood, doesn't fit. So
But,
how in the hell did that happen? And
Well, and
why are
that's-
we here today?
And I think that that falls into the realm of things we want to know versus things that we have to know in order to make our decision. I don't necessarily,
I'm
I
having a
don't,
hard time making a decision because I'm
Yeah.
trying to separate myself from
No.
if these guys meet the criteria just for the fence, as if there was nothing on the other side of it, versus
and that's,
junkyard on the other side of it.
and that's why we get paid the big bucks to do this job. So what I'm going to ask the board to do is to allow those decisions that we, and information that we wish to know and decisions that we wish would be made up to the boards and other groups of the city and other departments of the city that make those decisions, and that we really only focus on the decision that we have to make. And
And
that's
I can
whether,
make the comment, and I won't say another word, is that
Sure.
I would have no objection to this vinyl fence as it speaks to its compliance with the historic preservation requirements under circumstances that were not present at this time. That I'm struggling with that.
Yeah.
I would have no problem with the fence as it stands alone. The problem I have is what it's standing in front of. And Mr. Garcia, truthfully, if you guys were serious, those cars have been gone when you came here to ask for this application. I can't see how you guys could expect to get what you want from your neighbors if you didn't take care of the problem before you got here. That's just my personal opinion.
Well,
So-
may I just respond? Two
Sure.
things. First, I know there was an allegation that there's a junkyard or there's some type of unauthorized use. That hasn't been founded, that there's no code violation. What we've done is address what the city has wanted us to address. Now, with that being said, we're not saying that we're fine with what's going on. We're going to try to evict them. But what we're here for is we've done what the city has requested of us to come into compliance. As for getting them evicted, the governor signed a stay on evictions and certain things. So unfortunately, we can't necessarily move because there's a stay. But with that being said, we will make sure that they are out, and because the church, which doesn't operate this, whatever it's being operated there, it's not in their interest to keep that tenant there. Obviously, the neighbors are upset, and rightfully so. So they're going to do everything to get them out, as they're doing with complying with the city. They're doing everything to comply with the city. And the
Mr.
next thing is to
Garcia,
move them out because we don't want to have another violation.
Mr. Garcia, I'm gonna stop you there because I feel that this board, we're getting into a circular argument with the board, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep moving forward. We certainly,
Mr. Chair, I do have one question for Mr. Garcia.
sure.
You're saying that the church is the owner of the property, correct?
Correct.
And they want to get the present tenant out of the property, as the whole neighborhood would like to do.
Correct.
What are you going to be looking for? Who are you going to be looking to rent this to or lease this to in the future? Or what's the plans for the land?
To be honest with you, I would be lying to you if I told you what they're intended to use. They want to get this tenant out of there. My understanding is they want to use it in connection with the church, but I don't know. But the first step is getting this tenant out of there because they're causing issues for the church. That's why they're paying me money to be here. And obviously the neighbors are really upset, and no church wants the neighbors to be upset. So the first thing is getting them out. I don't know what the intended use is after that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, so then I'm gonna bring it back. I'm sorry, Arthur. I'm just gonna bring it back here because
Can I
again,
say something, Jason?
yeah, please.
Okay, I just want to make these points, and that is, we have one opinion saying that there is proof of violation, and you're saying that there isn't. So that's a problem for me. And that you intend to evict them, but you haven't. And that that's an ongoing issue, and you're not sure of how it's going to be used in the future. And what I feel is that the landscaping you have proposed is not sufficient to convince me that it's going to hide or at least disguise in many ways, this chain link fence. And I just feel that we need further information on the landscaping.
Well, with the landscaping, as Tricia mentioned, that it was just the locations of where the landscaping was being placed, which can be conditioned upon, if you approve it, that based on moving the landscaping to the city's liking, which I think it's something that's reasonable to move the landscaping to meet the city's requirement. I don't think that's going to be a big ask of us.
It would be easier for me to make a decision on this if I knew what that landscaping was and where it was going to be.
Well, some of the, you know, that's your, I understand, but the city can condition this approval on certain requirements that are met. So
I'm gonna just make a couple of final comments in my privilege as chair, and then I think I'm gonna entertain any motions that might be out there. But I just want to remind the board that we are bound by the four corners of the application. We should look at the specific requests of the application. In looking at the staff report, it's important for us to note what our job is, and we should only be considering the factors to determine whether the request by the applicant does or does not comply with the code. So I want to make sure that we stick to our role in capacity as this board. And as Mr. Garcia did note, as it is noted in the staff report, we are able, as a special condition of approval, should the board approve it, to condition the further approval on additional landscaping as required by zoning. There are other boards of the city that will be addressing many of the issues I think that we spoke about tonight, and we should certainly remember that in moving forward. So unless there's any new comments by the board, I'd like to not continue rehashing issues and concerns that we have. And instead,
just one comment, Mr. Chair, before we close it.
Please, Mr. Rosa.
In the photos, Mr. Garcia, I noted there's a mesh sort of going around the fence, right? Is that the intent on the new vinyl coated to then have this mesh continuing to surround it? I mean, I just didn't see that specified anywhere, because I think by putting the new fence in, great, there's a new fence, but we're almost going backward by not having this mesh, because the visibility will be, call it more of an eyesore if there's nothing keeping that blocked from what's back there, whether we're going to allege that it's a pound or not. You know, is that the intent? And Tricia, is there a way to ensure that that's the case if that's not already in there?
Mr. Rosa, to answer your question, if the city requires us to have a mesh, then we will have a mesh. And I think that mesh is a product of the current use of that tenant, that hopefully once we get them out, it's not required. But if the city requires us to have a mesh, then that's what we will do to come into compliance. We don't want to fight the city or anyone with anything that may alleviate some of the eyesores or the aesthetics of the property. So if that's what's required, we will have a mesh.
The mesh was included as part of the application.
Okay, I may have just overlooked it. And then one last question. I know it's not so much a comment. Included in the packet in the Cornerstone Property Management Commercial Property Management Agreement, there's one page, it's towards the back, and it references lease terms. And it states a 1-year lease for the rent of $1,870, dated 2017. Where, Mr. Garcia, where is that in terms of the scope of this? Is that supposed to be in some way part of the lease that was there at one point? That's now you know which document I'm referring to here?
I don't know which document you're referring to. It's the lease agreement you're saying, correct?
Well, no, it's actually the management agreement, the management commercial property. I'm trying to just understand if the lease is in effect currently.
The lease is still in effect.
Okay.
We will be, and as you mentioned, that amount of money that they're receiving is peanuts for the headache that the church is receiving. So again, we will make sure that they're out sooner or later, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa. Trish, I have one question, and then I'm going to entertain a motion. I know I already said that, but I want. If the board denies the application tonight, what are the church's other options moving forward here?
They could reapply to the Historic Preservation Board with a new request. They could also appeal the decision to the City Commission.
And if they were to apply with a new request, what type of fencing or boundary do you believe would be more appropriate than the green vinyl coated chain link fence, which is otherwise discouraged in this historic area?
There are other options listed in the code. There are wood privacy fences, which typically are not encouraged along right-of-ways. There's also a metal picket fence, which does allow for some visibility, which in this case may not be something that is of interest to provide, but you could also have the mesh lining the metal picket fence. And those are the typical options. There's also wood picket, of course, which also provides visibility.
And Mr. Garcia, why did the applicant not choose a more appropriate type of fencing after speaking with staff, as you said, been working with the city, knowing that this green vinyl fence was otherwise discouraged?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know, because this application was put in before I was retained. My understanding is they work closely with the city, and the city said that this was, obviously it's not discouraged, but it's not encouraged, right? It's not prevented, but the city, it's something that the city doesn't want to also encourage, but they work with the city. So that was the guidance that they received. If they would have been told do X, they would have done X, because it's not in their interest to go against the recommendations of the city when you're trying to come into compliance. So if I was there at that point, I would have.
So the bottom line is you don't know.
I don't know.
Okay,
But yeah.
But I appreciate the candor. No, I appreciate the candor there.
Yeah, but I think they went based on what the city was telling them, because
Sure.
they were just trying
It's
to
not
make sure.
prohibited.
Yeah.
It's not prohibited, so therefore they believe they could go forward.
Could I have a point of clarification?
Sure.
That is, how do we, as a board, deal with the issue that not everyone who wanted to be present could be present because of technical issues?
I don't think we do.
Is that
That should not have, in the chair's opinion, that should not affect your decision making. It's no different than somebody who would get a flat tire on the way to an in-person meeting, in my opinion. This is the way in which we meet, and everybody was given notice of the meeting, as well as the ability to come in early and check in and check technical issues. So therefore, I do not believe that that we should take into consideration people who had technical difficulties getting here. In my opinion, it's the same as if your car broke down on the way to a meeting.
Agreed.
So with that being said,
Chair, this is Trisha.
Hi, Trish.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point out that David Parker has his hand raised. I'm not sure if he's indicating he would like to speak.
Well,
And
Mr.
we also-
Parker, Dave, if you're here, we'd love to hear from you.
We also have an attendee with their hand raised as well, but that would be up to you if you wanted to reopen the public hearing.
I'm only showing Mr. Parker with his hand raised. Oh wait, I see attendees.
Chair, also, this is Yvonne Redding. The other Yvonne Redding listed under the participants there is Ms. Hunt.
Okay, so I'm not going to call on the other attendee. I'm going to limit it to because if I'm not mistaken, is Wanda? Did Wanda already address us?
Yes, she already spoke.
Okay, so respectfully, I'm going to decline her request to speak again if that hand is raised for that purpose. But I am going to ask for Ms. Hunt to, well, first I'm going to ask the board if there's any objection to reopening the public comment to hear from Ms. Hunt, who we knew was having some trouble getting on at this time, but is now with us.
No objection.
No? Okay, great. So this time we will reopen. I'm sorry, Sherry, I'm sure you're loving this, but I'm going to reopen public comment to allow Ms. Hunt to be heard for the board. Ms. Hunt, you're going to be granted 3 minutes as a member of the public to address the board, and I would ask you to do so.
Ms. Hunt, I'm going to swear you in. This is Sherry Wallen. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Ms. Hunt, you need to unmute yourself, please. Or maybe our host can unmute them.
I have tried, but since we have both in the panelist list, I'm not able to identify which one's which.
why don't we just unmute both since we know who the other Yvonne is, and we'll just figure out which one is which.
I already sent them the request to unmute.
Great. Ms. Hunt, are you with us? You unmuted now?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you so much. So the city attorney is going to swear you in, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Okay, thank you.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Sorry about my dogs.
I do.
Thank you so much.
Hello? I can't hear you now.
Yes, no, thank you so much. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I've listened to your conversation. So it sounds like the neighbors have already said things that I was going to say, and a lot of them don't appear to be relevant. So I think if it's only, they've only, what do you call it? If they're only in partial compliance with this fence or what they want to do, I hope you can reject it on that basis. And I'll end there. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hunt, thank you so much. Okay, so we will again close public comment. And with that, I'm going to go and see, Dave, if you're on and want to be heard. I know you had your hand raised earlier. Are you with us? I don't know if David is able to.
They do not have microphone enabled.
Okay.
So they have not joined into the audio.
All right, hopefully Dave can click that button to say enable audio, but in the meantime, let's move forward here. So at this point in time, we've again closed public comment. We've had full discussion with the board. We have questioned the applicant. So I am going to, at this point in time, entertain any motions that might be out there.
I move that we reject this on the basis of it being partially conforming.
Okay, so is there a second to Ms. Lyons' motion to deny the application?
May I just, this is Shari. I would need a citation to the section of the code that you're stating doesn't comply for purposes of the resolution, and just a little bit more facts so I could write that down.
Tricia, can you help me with that?
Sure, just one moment.
So looking at the staff report, I'm going to guess that's ULDR section 47-17.7.A that discusses garden walls and fences. Ms. Lyons, is that the section you're referring to?
Yes.
Where it talks about how this type of fencing is discouraged?
Yes.
Okay. And then just for purposes of the resolution, I know Ms. Wallen needs a little bit more. Can you just give us a little bit more factual information as to why you are moving as such?
Because I think that it's partially in violation of code,
How so?
as has been described.
Okay. I like
That-
that.
I couldn't hear that.
I'll need a little more than that. I'm sorry. What exactly is in violation of the code?
It said that it was approved in 71, the proposed chain link fence would be allowed, but must comply with new regulations that have been put in place since the date of approval, including the regulations for the Sailboat Bend Historic District.
Okay. So is Ms. Wallen, is that sufficient for your purposes?
I'm still not clear, but I wrote down that the fencing is discouraged because that
To be more specific, it's stated as discouraged within the historic preservation design guidelines for the city of Fort Lauderdale, which is referenced in section 472411 DCI.
Okay, so just to be clear, Ms. Lyons, your motion would be to deny the application based on the fact that the fencing is discouraged within the historic preservation guidelines noted in 472411 DCI.
Yes, and this, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'd like to second.
Seconded by Arthur Marcus. All right, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote for purposes of the motion to deny.
So
May
a
I
yes,
just read
a
may I
yes
just
would
read the
be-
resolution first before we do the?
Yes, Mr.
read it?
Yes.
Okay, this is Shari. A resolution of the Historic Preservation Board of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, denying a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations for the property located at 721 Southwest Second Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to remove a 5-foot chain link fence and install a 6-foot high green vinyl coated chain link fence and rolling gate with a green privacy screen, case number PLNHPCOA 2004-0001.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear, I just want to make sure everybody understands. A vote in favor of the motion is a vote to deny the application. A vote against the motion is a vote to otherwise consider or approve the application. So with that, we will do a roll call vote. Do you all want me to call the roll, or Jamie, is that something that you should be doing?
I can do it.
Yeah, that'd be great if you would.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Blank,
Nay.
Ms. Lyons?
Yay, yes.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Marcus?
yes,
Mr. Parker, can you speak? Can we hear you?
I don't know if he's connected to audio yet, so maybe we'll consider him an abstention.
Okay. Mr. Rosa
No.
and Mr. Chavon?
No.
Okay, motion fails.
I have to do a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve. Motion to approve with conditions, the resolution for certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number PLN HP 2004-0001 located at 721 Southwest Second Street, based upon the following findings of facts as outlined in the staff memorandum and the conditions therein. Am I to read the conditions into the record here?
Yes, or you could state the conditions as listed in the staff report on page 3. if you-
As the conditions set forth on the staff report in page 3.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Rosa. Is there a second to the motion?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chavon seconds. With that, any discussion on the motion?
I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
There's going to be a fence there one way or the other. This has been a very hard choice for me. And separating my personal feelings about the condition of that property from the fact that our charge is to stay within the 4 corners of the application, I found that there was going to be a fence there one way or the other, and that the vinyl green fence was discouraged but acceptable. Therefore, I went in favor of that, because if it wasn't that, it would be something else and there'd be a fence there. My heart goes out to the neighbors, and I hope they're successful in changing the property's use. But as far as the fence goes, I don't see any harm in approving one that goes around the property.
Thank you, Mr. Chavon. Any further comment on the motion? Any discussion on the motion?
May I read the resolution, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Ms. Long.
A resolution of the Historic Preservation Board of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, approving a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations for the property located at 721 Southwest Second Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to remove a 5-foot chain link fence and install a 6-foot high green vinyl coated chain link fence and rolling gate with a green privacy screen, case number PLN HPCOA 2004-0001.
Thank you so much. This will be another roll call vote. Jamie, if you don't mind, I will ask you to call the yeas and nays.
Okay. Ms. Lyons,
No,
Mr. Marcus,
no,
Mr. Parker available?
Yeah.
No?
We'll mark
Okay.
him down to abstention again, please.
Mr. Rosa,
Yes.
Mr. Chavon,
Yes.
and Chair Blank.
Yes.
Motion passed 3-2.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, that's going to bring us to our third and final matter before the board this evening. That is for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations in case number PLN HP COA 2004002. Certificate of appropriateness to install a removable awning structure over the outdoor dining area adjacent to the historically designated facade of the Las Olas Beach Club condominium. Let's go ahead and ask for disclosures. I'll run down the list. Ms. Lyons, any disclosures to make? Visits, site visits, discussions?
By it today.
Drive by, thank you. Mr. Marcus?
Drive by.
Mr. Parker, any chance you're with us yet? No. Mr. Rosa? Mr. Rosa, any disclosures? He might have had.
Not here.
Sorry there, I didn't realize I was on mute. I was talking to myself. No, none.
All right. Sometimes those conversations are the best, though. Thank you. Mr. Chavone, any disclosures?
I'm always by that building, and I spoke to Ms. Crush today.
Thank you. And I also have driven by that building often and also spoke with Ms. Crush. Okay, so with that.
They already voted.
Okay, so with that, I don't know if Ms. Crush, are you present or is Jason present to present on behalf of the applicant? I just want to make sure that we have everybody lined up here.
Mr. Chair, Courtney Crush, yes, I'm present and will be prepared to present, I assume, after Ms. Logan.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And with that, I am going to ask Trish to go ahead and read the staff report, please.
This property is located on South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard, on the west side of South Atlantic Boulevard and the Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard, between Cortez Street and Poinsettia Street. The Lauderdale Beach Hotel was constructed in 1936 as part of the first large resort hotel built on Fort Lauderdale Beach. And on April 23rd, 2002, a portion of the original structure was designated as a historic landmark. And then on June 24th, 2004, a preservation easement was granted to the Broward Trust for historic preservation by the Las Olas Beach Club. The plans show the installation of a freestanding trellis over the outdoor dining area along the South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard facade. The trellis system will be placed in front of the front facade and will be movable. It's a white powder-coated structural aluminum trellis, louvers overhead, and the louvers can be pivoted to be closed or set at an angle to redirect the sunlight. They will be sitting on in two separate areas, and they are on posts that are set on casters that can be secured in place or be moved if needed. Under the general criteria for a certificate of appropriateness in section 472411 E3 CI of the ULDR, criterion A applies, which concerns the effect of the proposed work on the landmark. The proposed trellis is to be placed in front of the structure, and the trellis is not physically attached to the historic structure. However, its placement will somewhat obscure the visibility of the front facade. Within the historic preservation design guidelines, the placement of a trellis in front of a structure is not specifically addressed. However, in the new construction design guidelines, when considering placement of new additions, it states that the following is encouraged: the location of additions to be set at a rear or side elevation whenever possible, that is subordinate to a historic building and compatible with the design, and then construction of additions so that historic building fabric is not radically changed, obscured, damaged, or destroyed. So this request partially meets the criterion in the fact that it's not physically attached to the building, but it is set in front of the front facade. Under the additional guidelines for a certificate of appropriateness in section 472411 D3CII of the ULDR, criterion B applies, which concerns the destruction of the historic landmark or removal of historic material. The proposed trellis is to be placed in front of the primary facade And again, since it's not being physically attached to the structure, it's not requiring any removal or alteration of the historic material. So in conclusion, in accordance with sections 4724.11 D3CI and 4724.11 D3CII of the ULDR, staff finds that the application for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number PLN HP COA 20040002, located at 101 South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard, partially meets the criteria as outlined in section 4724.11 D3CI of the ULDR, and it meets the criteria as outlined in sections 4724.11 D3CII of the ULDR. There is one condition provided for the consideration of the HPB. This application is to be approved, and that is the application is subject to the approval of zoning, building, and all ULDR requirements. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Logan. Ms. Crush, on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I share my screen?
If you can figure out how and they'll let you do it, I'm all for it.
Okay. If I get the permission, I think so. Otherwise, I will.
You can click the share screen button, the green button. There we go.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, board members, Courtney Crush, here this evening on behalf of the commercial condominium property owner, Las Olas Oceanfront, specifically its tenant Cafe Del Mar. As you were advised by Ms. Logan, this is a proposed change to existing and approved outdoor dining for the Cafe Del Mar restaurant at the Lauderdale Beach Hotel. Different perspective of the constructed hotel you can see in the foreground of this aerial. The Cafe Del Mar has existing approved outdoor dining in front of the historic facade. As Ms. Logan mentioned, the facade is actually subject to a preservation deed in favor of the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. I believe that the Trust President, April Kirk, may be participating in the hearing and to answer any questions and to share with you the Trust's thoughts regarding this proposed change of covering in front of the facade. This is the approved site plan for the Lauderdale Beach Hotel. Just again, showing the general area. It was approved in 2003 and provided for a 2,300 square feet of outdoor seating. That outdoor seating has been through a couple of tenants. Cafe Del Mar, whose owner, Leone Padula, owns and operates Cafe Del Mar, also owns and operates Gran Forno bakeries in our city. Really believes that the umbrella coverings that we see typically on our beach and beaches up and down the coast is something that can look better and can actually function a little better. So we spent a lot of time consulting with awning companies as to how we could propose something for the board's consideration and for the city's consideration that was both functional and aesthetically more pleasing. As you can see here, there's certainly nothing wrong with umbrellas. They provide shade from the sun, provide in a limited fashion, protection from the elements. They don't necessarily do something that enhances the facade, which again is subject to the historic preservation easement. What we are proposing are to have multiple, they're actually in small pieces of, as Ms. Logan indicated, powder coated aluminum, louvered structures that are freestanding. They are actually removable in the event of high weather events or high wind events, to be placed over the outdoor dining. They will be on casters and actually with affixed with a metal cord in place. But again, there are about 9 of them that can be removed, similar to an umbrella. In this case, it would probably take about 30 or 40 minutes instead of instead of pulling down the current covering. We believe that the proposed coverings are actually much more complementary, not only to the public realm, but also to the architecture of the Lauderdale Beach Hotel. They are freestanding structures, as you can see. They provide light when appropriate. They can be louvered closed in order to provide shade and also some protection from the rain. And we believe at the current location, it slightly will be proposing to reduce the square footage of the covered area from about 2,300 square feet of dining to about 1,900 square feet. That given the clean lines of the structures, the white coloring, which we don't believe creates a visual conflict or detracts from the facade, we sort of mimic, if you will, without trying to look like an older structure, but certainly do mimic the horizontal, both window features and other features that are on the facade. We believe that providing these covered structures at this location, which again is a substitution for covering which is already there, which is more cluttered, actually enhances the pedestrian experience and the opportunity to not only enjoy the outdoor dining, but to appreciate the facade of the hotel. So as Ms. Logan indicated, the criteria contained in section 4724.11 certainly evaluate any adverse impacts on a historic structure. Again, in this case, we are not proposing, this is not an addition. This is not a major alteration in the sense that we're not proposing to alter the facade at all. We are proposing to place these movable structures at an area and at a height location with very limited vertical elements that will allow the hotel facade to continue to be used. We don't believe there are any adverse impacts. With respect to Ms. Logan indicating that in general, when you have an addition, again, this is not an enclosed structure like a shed. Certainly understand why the city's guidelines would suggest that, you know, additions would be placed at a rear or other location. In this case, outdoor dining is on A1A, it's featured. This is the location where the outdoor dining is going to continue. So I think that we believe that replacing it with something more aesthetically pleasing, something we believe does not have any adverse impacts on the facade, and clean, it provides a clean, crisp experience. Hopefully the board will consider that that benefits both the experience and the facade. And we would very much appreciate your consideration of the certificate of appropriateness. And I'm certainly here to answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Crush, thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to hang on with us for a little while. I'm going to open it up to the public first, and then we'll come back to you for questions after.
Certainly.
At this point in time, Ms. Redding, do we have anybody signed up to address the board from the public?
We have April Kirk signed up through the website, and then I see 3 other call-ins, but they're not registered.
Okay, well, let's bring Ms. Kirk in and ask if she has, I don't know if she was sworn in earlier, but if not, let's get her sworn in. And Ms. Kirk, you will have 3 minutes to address the board.
Good evening. This is April Kirk, president of the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation, and I was not sworn in.
Great,
Yes.
and let's go
Hi.
ahead and do that now.
Yes, Ms. Kirk, this is Shire Wallen, Assistant City Attorney. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kirk. You have 3 minutes.
Sure. And I really don't think I will need that long unless there's any questions. As I said, I'm here representing the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. According to your report, we had not provided our feedback prior to you receiving that report, but our executive board did meet last week, and we support the placement of this trellis. We are not in opposition of the placement of this trellis, as it complements the building without attaching to the historic facade. And we definitely do agree with Ms. Crush's presentation that it is much more appropriate and aesthetically pleasing than the previous umbrellas that were on the site. And we do, again, as we had stated in the letter we submitted to staff and the applicant, that if any changes in the plan as they go to install the trellis impacts the facade of the building or needs attachments, that we be brought to the conversation again regarding our easement. And I welcome any questions from the board if you have any.
Ms. Kirk, thank you so much. Are there any questions of Ms. Kirk from the board? If not, we will let her go. Ms. Kirk, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate your comment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so turning back to the other attendees, I don't know if there are any other members of the public that wish to be heard on this item. Okay, hearing none. I'll give it another second.
Mr. Chair, I believe Yvonne had said that there were folks that called in. Yvonne?
There's a Leon Padula in the participation list, the attendees.
Right, so.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, Mr. Padula is the owner of Cafe Del Mar.
Right.
Certainly here as a resource, and of course, if he would like to make a few comments, that's fine. I think he was here to be a resource if the board had any questions.
Sure, I appreciate that.
And that was all.
All right, then, unless Mr. Padula is going to speak up and tell us he has something pressing to say right now or wishes to address the board, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment. And with public comment closed, I'm going to turn it to the board to ask any questions of Ms. Crush on behalf of the applicant on this issue, or excuse me, on this item.
I have one question, Arthur. One question for Ms. Crush. Who actually designed this? Was it there an architect or was it the owning company?
And I'm sorry, I'm just double checking, Mr. Marcus, Mr. Vice Chair, that I'm not on mute. The structure, STRUXTURE, is the awning company. They actually have an in-house architect. I have a long document I can share his name, but they do have architecture in-house.
Thank you.
Ms. Crush, I actually have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
In looking and reviewing the photographs that you included in the and the mock-ups that you included with the application, it appears that the new structure is actually going to have a lower kind of sightline, if you will, against the facade than the existing umbrellas, because the peaks, they almost block some of the existing awnings. Is that accurate?
I believe that is accurate, Mr. Chair. They're between 10 and 11, the proposed structure is between 10 and 11 feet. It seems that certainly might be higher than some of the lower portion, but the peaks of the umbrella, again, going from what's there in the photographs on the property today, are higher than the proposed trellis.
So I actually think you might even see more of the facade with this structure up than you would with the umbrellas.
I agree, and I think it doesn't have that conflict with the awnings behind it where you see the blue, because you have the slightly varying peaks of the existing umbrellas. This creates a clean line.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions of Ms. Crush from the board? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Crush, thank you so much for your presentation. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll turn it back to the board for any discussion amongst the board members. Any comments?
I have a question for Trish.
Okay.
Trish, what were the were there any issues for you guys in terms of this project that were non-compliant or iffy?
really goes back to the design guidelines and just in its statement as far as obscuring the front facade with anything on the front facade as far as an addition is concerned or new construction. However, this isn't attached physically to the structure, is removable and in a sense temporary.
Right, so they satisfied all those issues and everybody's happy. So, okay, thank you.
So
And,
Trish,
and the
I'm sorry.
Broward Trust is the same organization that basically brought that building back from the dead so many years ago. Is that correct, Courtney? When it was going to be torn down?
Certainly as Broward Trust, my understanding was formed for the purpose of preserving the hotel. And obviously there were designations and litigations and ultimately,
Yeah.
obviously Broward, yes.
I was just curious. It's an interesting history. All right,
And-
thank you.
And actually, that brings up a great point, Mr. Javon. Trish and Ms. Wallen, I want to confirm, we received prior to today's meeting, all of the members of the board received multiple communications as a supplement to the application of members from the trust. Ms. Kirk actually sent an email, as well as other residents nearby and of the building, all supporting this item. And if they are not already, I'd like to make that part of the record for today's meeting. I don't know if we need to do that formally or if that's already included. Maybe Ms. Wallen and Ms. Logan, you can clarify for me.
Was that included in the backup, Tricia?
No, that was submitted today.
Okay, then I'm gonna, at this point in time, I'm gonna ask that be made as part of the record and considered as part of the application moving forward. All right, so with that being done, is there any other comment or question from the board? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I do, Jason, I do, Arthur Marcus.
Sure.
I have a number of comments, and one of the things that has not been stated is that this is probably the most important Art Deco building in Fort Lauderdale. It was designed by Roy France, who was not known as an Art Deco architect, but he actually went on in Miami Beach to design many skyscraper hotels in the post-war modern style, or MIMO as it's called in Miami. And so he's an important architect, and this is a very important building. With that said, I have a number of concerns. As an architect, I really like the structure, the way it's been designed, the way it can be taken away, and it's a very clean and crisp design. However, I have a number of concerns about this. I do believe, unfortunately, it obscures the historic building much too much. I mean, I know that the awnings also obscure the building, but my second point gets to this, is that I'm concerned that this addition could be construed by a passerby as part of the original architecture. It actually looks so good, it looks like it was built with the building. But that's to me, that's the crux of the issue, that it could be mistaken for part of the historic building, which it should not. And the third comment is that Trish had stated in her staff report that the building only partially meets the criteria. For these reasons, I really have a big concern with how much of the building is being obscured on its most important elevation facing A1A. I'll let some of the other board members speak, but I'm sure I'll have more comments.
Well, it's interesting because it's funny. I take just the opposite approach. To me, I look at this proposal and think it almost shows off more of the building. The existing umbrellas, to me, block some of those window lines that are in my non-architectural, uninformed, uneducated, in this regard aspect.
Let me ask you a question, Jason. When you look at the rendering, what do you see first? Do you see the historic building, or do you see the trellis design?
Well, I think that, I don't know if that's a fair question. And the reason why is because I think that the imagery is designed to show what the trellis design is there. But when I look at the trellis design and try to say, does this give me more of a straight line to view the historic building? In my opinion, it does. I think that the umbrellas are more obstructing. But I also understand your point, because it almost creates a line of separation between that first floor window line and then the upper one. So I understand it. And I also agree to some extent with your point that it looks so good. It's almost not differentiated because it is that good. However, I personally am in favor of it. I think it makes it look very, very good. I think that I've always thought that those umbrellas are horrific. No offense.
I agree.
You know,
But-
so I think it accentuates the building, and to me that's the important part. But that's, again, my opinion.
But one of the prime tenets of historic preservation is to make an addition look different than the building, not the same. I mean, we could go back and forth.
But is this an addition? Actually, this brings up even a more important question that I have. And Trish, let me ask you, why is this before us? If this is not attached to the building, if this is not an addition, why is this any different than the umbrellas that were there? And did this tenant need to come before this board when they sought to put the umbrellas up as obstructing?
So as part of the designation, the right-of-way, like in front of the property, this is within the property line. It's included in the designation. So that's why it's before you. And then this is considered to be a structure rather than, as part of our code, you don't need a permit for the erection of a umbrella and a table, but you do need a permit, a building permit for this type of structure.
Well, that certainly answers my question. Okay, any other comments from the board on this piece? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion if there is one. Anyone? Are there any motions on this piece?
I will make a motion. Unfortunately, I have to make a motion that I don't believe this should be approved because I do believe it obscures much too much of the historic building and looks too much like the historic building. And these are, in my learning, these are criteria that need to be followed so that you can preserve and protect and see the original building. Somebody visiting from Iowa walking by will say that it looks the same as the building and looks like part of the building. That's my concern, and that's why I was making the motion.
So you're making a motion, Mr. Marcus, to deny the application?
Yes.
All right.
May I please have the section of the code or that you are relying on, Mr. Marcus?
I don't have a section of the code, but all I'm saying is, as has been said, that this project only partially meets the criteria of the code. I think, and part of the code states that a new structure or something shouldn't obscure the original architecture. I don't know the exact language, but I do believe that this obscures the building too much.
Just looking to the, Ms. Wallen, just looking to the staff report, appears to be section 47-24.11, point C, point capital C, point 3, point lowercase c, point lowercase
I believe that's a typo. It should be point 11, point D. Tricia, you want to make that amendment to the staff report? It's actually.
That's correct.
All right,
Okay, so
that's
that's on page 2 of the staff report. So this doesn't talk about the obstruction. What does this?
It does reference the obstruction as far as,
somewhere.
again, in the staff report, the effect of the proposed work on the landmark or the property upon which such work is to be done. And then Trish in the response, excuse me, I'm sorry, not Trish, but the staff in their response note that the construction of additions so that the historic building fabric is not radically changed, obscured, damaged, or destroyed. I believe
Okay.
that's what Mr. Marcus is referring
But
to.
it also says the placement of the trellis will not remove or alter any distinctive architectural features, although the front facade will be obscured.
Okay, so I'll note that section of the code and that you're stating that it would be obscured.
Is there a second to Mr. Marcus's motion?
I second it.
Okay, Ms. Lyons seconds it. Any discussion on the motion?
May I read the resolution?
Please.
A resolution of the Historic Preservation Board of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, denying an application for a certificate of appropriateness for a major alteration for the property located at 101 South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to install a freestanding trellis over an outdoor dining area on South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard. Case number PLN HPCOA 2004-0002.
So I just, before we call the motion for a vote, I just want to comment that I think that in this instance, the motion is really taking a personal preference as opposed to a strict reading of the code. The staff notes that it partially meets criterion because of the obstruction. I would also note that the overwhelming support for this item from the public that's directly related to the historic building itself, I would argue should be given great weight by this board. And I would encourage my board members to vote against the motion with all due respect, Mr. Marcus. I would also remind the board, a vote in favor of the motion is a vote to deny the application. A vote against the motion is a vote to have further consideration.
Jason,
So,
do you feel that your position is consistent with the last situation we considered?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said, do you feel that what you just said is consistent with the fence issue that we just discussed?
Yes, I do, because the public support for this item is relevant to the four corners of the application, whereas the public opposition in the last item considered was relating to matters not within the four corners of the application. They did not, the public in the last item did not take issue with the specific application matters that were before us, but rather the broader scope of the situation, and therefore I did not believe it was appropriate. Here, the public comments, the public, information we received, Ms. Kirk presenting to the board, as well as the correspondence that were provided to us before the meeting, are directly related to and relevant to the application itself and the matters contained.
It may be my misunderstanding, but I felt that those who opposed the fence that's there and opposed a new fence.
Okay. Well, I understand, and we can certainly talk more about that.
I see a parallel in the issue. They're opposing, these other people approving, and I don't think you can ask us to consider that.
Okay, I'm asking you to consider this item and the information that's here. And I'm encouraging you as a board member to vote against the motion because I believe that quite frankly, the motion should be, or the application should be approved, and I'll be voting against it, but certainly you can vote however you wish on the motion that
Mr.
you
Chair, I just wanted to clarify something you said. I'm not basing this on personal opinion. I'm basing it on the staff report, where the staff report says that the front facade will be obscured.
Sure, I understand. Certainly.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I realize it's unusual. May I respond to Mr. Marcus?
Sure.
If it's okay with Mr. Marcus?
Of course.
Having, not myself, having worked very hard to, as I think you said, provide something that enhances and perhaps is too attractive, such that you feel it's part of the experience. We really did put a lot of thought into that. I think it would be important to you, as I've seen you as a board member, to always allow historically preserved structures, facades to be enhanced. We believe that proposing a structure like this enhances this very, very important building at this location. If there are features, whether it's a height or a presence that can be further refined, and you find our efforts so far worthwhile, we would very much like to continue to do so. I think, and I don't mean to speak to those of you who have not commented, the umbrellas look junky. We are seeking to, again, provide something that doesn't create too strong a presence, that it conflicts. I do think the graphics that we shared with you, of course, featured it. The goal is that it just blends so that you have this light and, experience of light and air. We do think, and in response to Board Member Lyons' comment, the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation owns this easement. So their thoughts are also very, very important to us. So given the feedback of the easement owner, if you will, and Mr. Marcus's comments and some of your other comments about how this experience is improved, seems to further experiencing historic preservation and that historic facade versus what is there today. The fact that this trellis on wheels qualifies as a structure and may therefore be appropriate versus the approved. And again, it was approved as part of the outdoor dining and the tables were approved as part of a site plan, as this would be. The fact that this is technically a structure because it's on wheels doesn't mean that what's there is not something that cannot be improved upon. And I just want to share with you that our team would be very happy to listen and to continue to refine it, because we're really trying to enhance the experience. And using the word obscure, if I may, suggests that there's nothing there today. There is always going to be, especially in 2020, hopefully a lot of outdoor dining and experience. And again, this facade should both be revealed and also ground level uses are going to continue at this location, Mr. Marcus.
Thank you, Ms. Crush. Okay, we do have a motion pending currently. Is there any other comment on the motion from the board? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, please. If you don't mind, Jamie.
Ms. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Marcus,
Yes.
Mr. Rosa,
No.
Mr. Chavon,
No.
and Chair Blank.
No. With that, the motion having failed, I do believe we need a motion to approve the application, and I'd entertain such a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Motion to approve with conditions, the
Rosa.
resolution. I thought it was someone saying something with resolution for certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number PLNHP 2004-0002, located at 101 South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard. Based upon the conditions set forth herein, the application be subject to the approval of zoning, building, and all ULDR requirements.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to Mr. Rosa's motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Chavon. Any discussion on the motion to approve?
Just a comment.
Sure.
Ever since I got on this board, I've gotten a great education and I've learned a lot, especially from guys like Arthur. It's always a challenge to try to keep historic preservation and at the same time have it work with modernization. A lot of tentacles on these things. For me, this is an improvement. Putting any personal feelings or how it works in other areas, just to look at it, to me, I like it. I like the way it looks. I think it's the future, given the 2020 things that we're learning now. If I was to look at this beach with nothing but umbrellas on it, and then I looked at it with this type of architecture and had people like Arthur guiding some of the new ideas so that we do have a consistent complementary function with the new stuff, I think we'd have a better looking beach. And I'm trying to be fair here. I know that when you put stuff on wheels, back in the old days, we used to put trailers behind bars and put beer in them because they were considered movable and they never moved after you put them there. But I get it. And I I guess I'm trying to avoid the word compromise, but you know, we can't wait for something to fall down and say we have to replace it. We have to be proactive. And I think this was a good idea. I struggled a little bit with it, but I think it's an enhancement to the beach. And that's why I voted for it.
I would like to say that I think it changes the character dramatically. And I agree with Arthur that it really turns it into something that is 21st century. And this is a building that belongs to 1936, not 2020. And I think something that would be between what is there and what has been proposed that doesn't obscure the facade would be more appropriate.
The end.
All right, any further comment? Okay, with that, Mr. Chavone, I would just note that compromise is something that founded this country, so never shy away from compromise. I'd ask for a roll call vote, Jamie, if you would.
Mr. Chair, may I just clarify something? Mr. Rosa, is your motion based on the findings of fact in the staff report? This is Shari.
I'm going back to it because the staff response in the first section for A sets forth that it does not meet the criterion. I mean, do I have to specify here?
Yes, you would have to specify why you're motioning to approve, so I could include it in the resolution.
Well, is it subjective in that I don't believe it obscures in the fashion that is found here in the staff response? Am I making that specification?
I can write that in the resolution, yes.
So
that you agree with everything else except that.
Correct. We'll take it as such.
Okay, Mr. Chair, may I read the resolution?
Yes, and then I just want to check with Mr. Chavone that he's still willing to second the motion after you do.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
A resolution of the Historic Preservation Board of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, approving a certificate of appropriateness for a major alteration for the property located at 101 South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to install a freestanding trellis over an outdoor dining area on South Fort Lauderdale Beach Boulevard. Case number PLN HP COA 2004-0002.
Sherry, you went on mute.
Finished. Thanks.
Okay, all right, there we go.
Jamie, are you doing the roll call?
Yes. Ms. Lyons,
No.
Mr. Marcus,
No.
Mr. Rosa,
Yes.
Mr. Chavon,
Yes.
and Chair Blank.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you so much. Ms. Crush, thank you as always. Ms. Kirk, thank you for appearing. We appreciate it. All right, so that's the last of the items that we have for communication, or excuse me, for consideration. The next item on the agenda is any communication to the City Commission. I'm not sure that we have any this evening. Trish, any items for communication to the city that we need to address?
No, that would be from the board if the board has anything they'd like.
I didn't know if you had any. Didn't
Uh-oh.
know if you had any recommendations. Okay. I don't believe we have any tonight, unless I'm missing anything that anybody else wanted to bring up to address with the city. Okay. The next item would be for the good of the city of Fort Lauderdale. I don't believe that we really have much. I would just note that tonight for our first virtual meeting of this board, I think it went pretty smoothly. I think everybody did a good job, and I commend my fellow board members on working with the flow of things to try to effectuate things as best we could. Of course, I'm going to start doing this every meeting, and I want to make it clear I would encourage the board members to accept the meeting materials electronically as opposed to the hard copy. You don't have to, but I would encourage it. I think it works to save the city money. I also think that that it's environmentally friendly, and that's really important. So I would ask you to consider that. Other than that, I don't believe we have any other items for consideration. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, Mr. Chavone with a motion. We have a second. Meeting will be adjourned at 7:25. Thank you so much, everybody. Great seeing you and stay healthy.